Welcome back, Watch Fam. On today's video, I'm gonna be discussing a topic that I think people need to know. There's many of you out there that still have not bought your first watch, but you're thinking about it. And here are 5 of the most important things you must know about watches. And before we get started, I wanna tell you, hit that link right now and don't forget to subscribe so that way you don't miss any of the new videos. So number 1 is gonna be, what type of watch is it? You know, for some people, a watch is just a watch, but in reality, there's so many different types of watches that you need to know the differences. Whether it's gonna be a dress watch, a sports watch, a chrono, and there's a lot of different terminologies out there, but here are some of the basic terminologies for the watches. The first one I want to talk about is a dress watch. A dress watch is going to be something that obviously looks a little bit more dressy, hence why it's called the dress watch. It's going to have either a leather strap or alligator or something of that nature, and it's going to be something that looks delicate and something you would wear in a nice outfit. Although nowadays you're able to mix match these dress watches with casual outfits as well. But a dress watch can also have a metal bracelet. For example, on a more higher end could be something like a Datejust. Has a metal band, but it obviously looks more casual and dressy. There's no special buttons, no crazy activity going on there. Something somewhat kind of plain seems to always help out when you're going for a dress watch, unless of course you want to get something crazy. Next is going to be the sports models. Now in this category, there's going to be a bunch of different variations, including of course the ever so popular dive watches. But a sports model is always going to be a little bit more robust, and of course it's just going to look that much more sporty. There's going to be numbers on the bezels and different things that are going to point out to the fact that it's a sports watch. Most of these watches are also referred to sometimes as tool watches because they're used for different hobbies, sports, or activities. But a sports watch is something that I feel at times is a little bit more universal. You can use it for everything. But keep in mind again that in a sports watch category, there's so many different types. So keep in mind with these categories, there's also gonna be so many different variations, whether it's gonna be a tourbillon, a day date, a perpetual calendar, a moon phase, a chronograph, which is also very popular and can be seen on both dress watches and sports watches. But you're gonna wanna know what type of watch it is. Because if you're somebody that's gonna be always going to the office and in somewhat of a formal setting on the regular, or perhaps that's what you wanna use the watch for, then maybe a 52mm Invicta may not be the right model for you. So always keep in mind what type of watch it is, whether it's gonna be dressy or sporty. The next one is gonna be the size. Now, I think that nowadays, size is one of the most important things in watches, you know? I think that if you buy the wrong size watch, you're gonna regret it. It's gonna determine how often you're gonna use this watch. I mean, it's happened to me. Once upon a time, I have owned many watches that were 44mm, and nowadays I do find them to be a little bit too large on my wrist. I think the most universal size ever is a 40mm, but you gotta buy what you like. At the end of the day, you gotta buy what you like at that time and what you feel comfortable with. But make sure that you know what size is the watch. You could be looking at a watch online and perhaps maybe buying it over the internet. And if you don't look at that millimeter size, that can mean a big difference. But size is important. It goes back to what I was saying before about whether it's gonna be sporty or it's gonna be dressy. That's gonna determine if it's gonna fit the sleeve of your shirts or not. I always feel that a watch that's a little bit smaller is always gonna be that much more dressy and formal. So once you know exactly what type of watch that you want and what you're gonna use it with, then now we need to determine what would be the right size for you. And of course, different people have different size wrists, so that's also gonna dictate the size. Again, I think that a 40mm is always a good base of size. You can go down a couple millimeters, and if you're bigger, you can go up a couple millimeters, but it's a good area that you wanna be in. So don't forget, I mean, at the end of the day, you gotta buy what you like and you have to express yourself however you want. But I would not recommend you show up with a nicely fitted suit wearing a 54mm transformer on your wrist. Next, we got the watch brand. The watch brand is important. I don't mean a Rolex like this one I'm wearing here. I just mean you need to know the brand. Can't tell you the times people have told me that they saw this watch at the mall or at a cruise ship or whatever, or on the internet that they wanted it and they liked it. And I said, well, what brand it is? They said, I don't know. I mean, wouldn't you think that's important? I'm not saying it has to be high end, but you need to know what you're buying. And also, different brands specialize at times at different types of watches, where there might be some watches that are very affordable, well made, but they specialize in dress watches, while there's other watches that, in my opinion, are better at sports watches. So you want to know the brand, so that way you know which way to navigate. Whether it's going to be a Rolex, a Citizen, a Seiko, whatever it is, just know your brand, do some research about it, and make sure it's what you like. Again, it always goes back to that. You have to buy what you like, because if it's not that, then don't buy anything. Or unless you're trying to buy to achieve a status, then I think you really need to know the watch brand. Because if you're trying to buy something to achieve a status, you're gonna be spending a good amount of money. And the last thing that you wanna do is shell out your hard-earned coin on a brand that's unexistent, that nobody even knows, or perhaps maybe is even experimental. Or you might just blow all your money on an expensive pile of turd. Now, next we're gonna discuss the movement type. I can go about this topic for an hour. There's a lot of different movements, but in reality, I'm talking about the basics of the movement. The movements are gonna be three types. We're gonna first start with the manual wound movements. Now, this is a mechanical watch, which today's world where many people opt out for an iWatch, which to me, it's kind of a cell phone on your wrist. There's a novelty of having a manual watch with all the small pieces in there. And these watches are gonna be two ways. They're either gonna be manual wound or automatic. Now, the manual wound watch, you're gonna have to physically wind the watch every morning or every 3 mornings or whatever amount the power reserve is. Some people hate that. Other people love it. I, for one, don't really mind it. I think it's part of the hobby. I mean, if you can't wind your watch and you don't like it, then maybe you're just not really into watches. Maybe you're just into the status thing. And if that's the thing, that's okay too. But the next up is gonna be the automatic watch. Now, an automatic watch is also a mechanical watch, exactly like a manual, except the difference is that instead of winding it with your hand every 3-4 days, if you're gonna be wearing it constantly, there's actually a counterweight rotor in the back which does the winding for you. Nowadays, those tend to be the more popular because it kind of gives you that feeling of, I have an automatic watch. I don't have to wind it. It just gives it that much more of a kicker. Now, the last and most popular actually in the world at this point is gonna be the quartz model. This is very important to know. I mean, a quartz watch is pretty much a battery operated watch. I mean, it's not rocket science here, okay? Now, we can get into the whole way it works and all that, but there's other videos for that. It's important to know what you're buying, because if you're buying a watch that's a certain price and above, me personally, I don't wanna pay $10,000 for a watch that's battery operated. Not saying that that's bad if you did or if that's what you want, okay. But personally, there's a threshold where I'm paying a certain amount of money where I would want a mechanical movement. I want to know that I have engineering and small pieces on my wrist, and it gives me that sense that I'm wearing a machine on my wrist rather than a glorified calculator. You know, I think knowing the movement is important. I can't tell you how many people have dropped off watches over the years and said, I need to have the batteries replaced, when in reality what they needed was a movement overhaul. It was an automatic mechanical watch. So the last thing is gonna be the type of seller for these watches. And obviously the first one's gonna be the authorized dealer, whether it's gonna be a standalone store of that brand, or not every single company is big enough to have a standalone store. Some of them are retailed by authorized dealers out there. You know, there's small shops that perhaps sell 5 or 6 different watch brands, and they may carry the watch brand that you like. But that's one of the easiest ways to find the watches. But then there's also gonna be a very large amount of internet retailers where you can go online and you can buy these watches. Of course, like everything in this world, you gotta make sure that where you're buying it from is a legit source and that you're not getting an Alibaba knockoff, because believe it or not, these things exist whether you're buying a $50,000 watch or a $500 Casio. There are knockoffs out there for every range of models. So you wanna make sure that you're buying it from a legitimate source. There's also going to be what's called the gray market, or let's just call it the independent sellers. These are people that also sell you the watches, and they obtain them from different sources, whether your favorite brand is doing a sellout or they're buying it from a store that's closing out of business and they're acquiring these watches. But there's many different routes you can go about these watches. And then there's always the opportunity of maybe buying it off a friend or somebody. I mean, hey, you never know. People sell watches all the time and they're out there. All you gotta do is do your homework and make sure you're getting exactly what you're paying for. So these are 5 things you need to know when you're buying a watch. It doesn't matter whether you're buying your first watch or you already own a watch, because I do know people in the past have had some nice watches and don't know anything about watches. When I mean nothing, I mean nothing. But always keep in mind that whatever watch you're gonna buy, it's something within the means of, what you can afford. You don't wanna buy something that's too crazy. Just buy something that's functional at first and that you like. And that is the most important thing out of everything here is you need to buy what you like. But first, you need to know these 5 things. Comment below if you think there's anything else that I missed there, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button right now before you miss any more of my videos.